to the Fiercely Fueled podcast. Today with me, I have Coach Pia again, and we have one of our dear friends, the one and only Stacy Bama Burr. Thanks for joining us, Stacy. You are like the first official guest on this podcast, and I can't think of a more perfect person to be first guest on my podcast.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to be a part of the team and to be a part of the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things, Pia, Stacy, and I have been co-coaching some athletes recently. So Stacy doing the training side of things and Pia and I doing the nutrition side of things. And as we kind of got together and developed this partnership, one of the things that became very, very clear that all of us do, whether it be this type of person is drawn to us specifically, or that this is just representing a broader theme within the lifting community, is that we all work with athletes who are really busy and have just a lot going on. So I think that there's this perception that if you're working with power lifters, or for us, we've got some strongman competitors and also some Olympic weightlifters. But if you're lifting with people, or if you're working with people that lift, potentially at maybe a high level, or maybe not, that their sole focus is lifting, and that they don't work and they have all of this time to just, lift and eat. And that's like a super small portion of the lifting community. The reality is, as coaches, we're working with this broad spectrum of people, and almost all of them have jobs. Many of them have jobs that they have to perform really well at. And they've potentially got families or other obligations or other hobbies outside of lifting. And we've got to kind of manage all of that. So that's kind of this theme that we really drill down and figure out, what does each individual athlete need to do to succeed, and whether success to them is stepping on the platform and having a hell of a meet, or if success is just getting to the gym on a consistent basis and putting in the work and getting stronger, and maybe having body composition changes or changes to their mindset that we know come about because of getting stronger. So that's what we're going to talk about, is what are the specific needs of these really busy lifters and how do we coach them?
This is going to be really fun. And I think that we have just talked about it a little bit, right? We've talked about it before, and I have previous coaching experience with younger athletes as well, like in a high school setting and things like that. And so working with and, transitioning into this coaching environment where, like you said, I coach powerlifters. I do have a couple strongman athletes. And then I also have people who just are athletes, but, it's not necessarily, that's not what pays their bills, right? Because what you talked about, is just like, as athletes, people think, oh, at the top tier, the higher level, we're getting paid to eat, sleep, train. But in reality, that's a very, very, very few amount of people, a small population, because most people, just normal people who don't even train, you think about the demands that they have on their daily lives. And so what we're working with is, is that dynamic, but with more demands, because we have to make time for that training, and we're making time for training. And then if we want to do well, we have to schedule out our meals. We have to plan timing. We have to do a lot of different things. And it's not just strictly focused on our athletics. We have to perform in our careers. We have to perform, we have to be an active participant in all of our relationships that we're a part of too, because coaching high school athletes, which I've done in the past, our demands aren't nearly as high, right? You don't have families, you don't usually have, children, you don't have a lot of the responsibilities that you do as a full-grown adult, right? And so that time frame and age, you can get away with eating a meal or two. You can get away with sleeping maybe an hour sometimes, right? Not always, and that's not what I'm advocating, but there are a lot of things that we can get by with whenever, it's a younger athlete or whenever it's not athletes that, have a little bit of responsibilities outside of just the gym, outside of just the walls in, your training. So this is something that I think has been a really cool thing for me to note, and just how to change my coaching. What are the what are the needs that I have to meet for these different kinds of athletes? And I think when you work with athletes of different levels too, you recognize in each individual what's the most important part. And so, like what you just said, Kristen, there's a lot of different avenues that we have to go about with this. It's not just the training, which is usually, I write the programs, I, talk about form, technique, but it's not just that. And with nutrition, what you guys do, it's not just macros, it's not just meal, just suggestions. What it is actually figuring out how to intertwine all of it so you can be the most successful. And I think that's one of the, no matter what the outcome or what the end goal is, these things that you have to work into your daily lives, your habits, like all these things all work together. And so what we're trying to do now is trying to make sure that we're like, you are an athlete. You are an athlete, regardless of if you go to the gym for leisure, if you go to the gym for health, if you go to the gym because you do want to compete. And so we're figuring out how we can prioritize our time, how we can prioritize our meals, how we can just get the most and the best out of ourselves, period. Right. And so even if, we're not an elite level athlete competing at the the highest end, we are still trying to perform as well as we possibly can. And that's what I think the majority of all of our athletes, no matter their discipline or sport, they want to be better. And we're figuring out how to optimize every, avenue and, everything that we're working through.
For sure. And I think that one of the big things that Pia and I have figured out with our coaching, particularly, we utilize an app where there's a lot of data being inputted. And with that data, we can start to see trends in people's lives. We can see trends in their work lives and how their work stress or life stress is potentially impacting their training or their nutrition choices, how their sleep is impacting everything. We can see everything all laid on top of each other and really start to spot these long-term trends where we can, and that's when we can start to dial things in and kind of grab like the low hanging fruit, right? So if we've got an athlete who's struggling in the gym a little bit, and we start looking at their sleep patterns and see like, well, you're really not sleeping that much. Maybe we could increase your sleep. And in doing that, like in working on all of these different areas that are all interconnected. So sleep and nutrition and training, and stress management, we can start to make impacts that affect them far beyond just the gym. They can start to like perform better at work, and they're a little bit more mentally sharp or focused at work because we're getting out all these little things dialed in. And whether someone thinks of themselves as an athlete or not, because I know, Stacy, you have clients that probably don't think of themselves as an athlete. You think of them as an athlete because you know how interconnected everything is. And if we can start to like make some changes in one little area, everything gets better. So whether you're just like an entrepreneur who just wants to go to the gym and like have fun and, get fit and get stronger, all of the things that apply to athletes still apply to this person. This is where like it's an element of human performance, I would say, where we're really looking at what areas of your life can we make minor changes to that are going to pay dividends throughout your life.
And immediately, whenever I'm piggybacking right off of you, but as if I have a client that expresses to me that their training didn't go well, and I'm looking at technique, I'm looking at execution, and everything looks like it should, is done correctly, my first question is, how is your recovery? How are you sleeping? How's your, how are you eating? And all these different things, hydration, these little things, right?
Yep.
It's not necessarily people want to think that, oh, well, my toe was turned 2 centimeters to the left, or I didn't have the right shoes, whatever it is, right? But it's really not usually that. Now, there are certain cases where a little thing could be the, sumo deadlift could be a little tweaky, right? But the main, factors usually don't have to do with that. It's usually, okay, I asked the question, oh, Stacy, I didn't sleep, but 2 hours last night, or I have so much work-related stress, or my dieting is off. So check this one. This is one that happens a lot with a lot of my athletes who either also coach or who travel and train and, have to figure out different gyms. If I have an athlete who's not doing, they don't look the sharpest, they say, okay, well, I'm traveling a lot for work. Now, what does that lead to? The traveling a lot for work means probably limited mobility. And it also means, your eating is pretty much, unless we're planning it strictly and planning it out, you're probably just at the mercy of whatever is around you, right? So if the nutrition's off, if the sleep is off, your mobility is not on point, you're not feeling your best, then what happens? It turns into the outcome with your training, right? And so many little things like that we don't necessarily think about, when we're younger or when we're younger, athletes and things like that. They really add up whenever you become an adult. And it's just that compounding effect that if you do these little things and make these little adjustments, you'll have that big long-term just growth and everything. And it's not usually quite as challenging in the way that you think it is. It's not in the gym. It's the things that you're doing outside the gym that are going to affect everything else.
I just wanted to, if I can jump in there, just touch on something that Stacy said is longevity. And I think that's a really important point here, because thinking back and if I think of, there's something that almost all of my clients have in common. There's something about getting under a bar or strength sports that draws a particular type of person. That's a person who's generally, if you stick with it for any given time, you're not used to hard work. You're used to getting in, doing the work, no matter what. And that's kind of also, it's a good thing. It's also a bit of a problem, because people just kind of soldier through things, especially as you get older. They kind of push through, without actually going, well, it doesn't actually have to be this way. So on one hand, it's managing like that, the work ethic, if you could call it that makes lifters what they are, that draws us to the sport, is that, you need a certain level of work ethics. It's work ethic. It's very honest work. You either get results or you don't, but you got to put in the time. And I think there's a beauty to that. But also that kind of personality can just carry on going on and on and on, and like kind of drilling themselves into the ground if you don't start managing their resilience and you don't start managing their time and their stress and going, well, you're like 42 now, so you kind of would maybe be better like not feeding your workout with like a McDonald's burger. Okay, let's not I don't know if I can say that, but like a fast food burger. And these kind of things that are very forgiving. Like you said, when you're 17 years old and your biggest problem in life is training, versus when you're 42 years old and you're running a business and you're a dad and, your children aren't sleeping. It's these small things that will add up and that will keep you going into, later on in life. So I think it's about longevity and about the long game. For me.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and Pia and I just had this conversation in our weekly meeting this morning about how getting athletes to look at like, what can we do in our daily lives to decrease stress levels and increase longevity, just like you were saying. And that sometimes it's literally just stop and do some breathing for 3 minutes out of your day. Like do some, right? Like
that's like, I'm jumping in with, but that's the thing is like, it's not that hard to change the issues that are problems, but we just have to recognize it first. So like that awareness, I think that the app that you guys have and everything is awesome because you can actually tangibly look at it. You can track the numbers, say, okay, this reading, your resting heart rate, all these different things, these numbers, like data doesn't lie. And so as an adult, I believe that collecting what you've been doing for years, however old you are, you've been collecting data. You've been collecting data and your life has been going based off of some type of pattern or trend, right? And so if we recognize these patterns, we look at the data as you get older. Sometimes, our hobbies, sometimes our priorities definitely shift, right? It's just like getting stronger, in my opinion. As you get stronger, it's not the fact that the weight becomes lighter. It's the fact that you get strong enough to handle what is required of you, right? So as we add more responsibilities to our plate, as we add more, we've got a family, we've got more responsibilities. As we add all these things in our life, it's not that we're just going to magically, it's just so easy for us, right? Although we might make it look easy because that's always the goal. But what we have to do is we get better at figuring out how to prioritize these things. And so that's one thing that is my biggest, time management. This is one thing that I know you guys love to talk about too, but we have more responsibilities. We have different things that we have to work around, work with. I have clients who, I have clients on opposite ends of the spectrum. I have some who the first sign of, oh, this is an inconvenience, I don't know if I'm going to be able to train. But then again, I also have clients who are in the military. Who I had a client who just recently, she traveled to Alaska for, a military training, and she didn't have access to hardly anything, but we made it work, right? Because there was that willingness, and she has very diligently tracked, this is the amount of time that I have. What can I do? And so sometimes it's just time management. It's making sure that we're making this, whatever the situation is, work best for us and optimizing things. So I think optimization and time management is just a really key factor in this that nobody really thinks about. They think it's just strictly your exercises, your programming, okay, your dieting, what is a specific food? But if we figure out how to optimize everything, time management is the biggest hack, because then you suddenly, all the responsibilities that may seem super overwhelming, just all at once, we now figure out how to integrate all of them, and then it works for us.
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of when we onboard a new client and we're working on, okay, where are we going to start? What are the things that we're working on? What are your goals? One of the first things that we have to figure out, that we have to help them figure out, is where are we going to make the time for you to do some of these things? So if their schedule dictates that they're going to need to do some meal prep and things like that takes an element of planning that maybe they're not used to. But if we can get them to sit down once a week, look at their schedule, look at what the potential obstacles that they're going to face that week are, what things do they have on their schedule that are out of the ordinary, and literally schedule out the days and times that they're going to do their training, what meals they're going to have, all of the sudden, everything seems completely manageable. Instead of people feel really overwhelmed when they take on changing their nutrition, this way they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually really simple once I sit down and schedule it and make a plan for myself. And then they can just go about their week so simply. It just makes everything so much more simple, as opposed to, I think everyone wants to complicate changes, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but it's the time management is where you're going to find the time and the bandwidth to do these things.
But and it doesn't have to be black or white. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And you spoke about it earlier with your client in the military. It's literally about doing what you can with what you've got on that day. And if you plan, you can plan the best week ahead, and you might have something keeping you late at work. Like I've got a client, she works nights, and she's been working like crazy, her night shifts are getting even longer, and she's just like, okay, cool. How do we evolve? I mean, I had prepped everything. I didn't get to gym, but I still did like 20 push-ups, or whatever it is. And it's also understanding that you don't have to have this, there's an ideal of what we want. Obviously we'd want to get to this level of achieving everything. But if there's circumstances outside of your control, that's okay. You can freestyle, you can adapt, but you can still do things that are going to get you towards your goal. And planning may be, okay, well, I know that I have a busy week. I'm just going to make sure I get in my water, or whatever it is. You can still plan, for busyness, if that makes sense. But you're still doing something, and you're still providing a level of structure that you wouldn't have had. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's all about doing I tell people this all the time. Like, all I ask is that you do your best given what you've got that day. and know that your best is going to change from day to day.
That
I
is
probably
so true.
got that from
It's
you,
all
Stacey.
it's all relative, yeah. 100%.
I got it from someone else too.
But it's like I keep on trying to explain things to my friends in like powerlifting terms, but it's like you were saying, it's progressive overload. We don't get stronger, we just get better at handling weight, you know? It's the same in our lives. And it's also like, just let's adjust, let's do what we can. It's relativity, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
I think of everything in powerlifting terms.
Pia talks about that all the time, is progressive overload for life. And that's
I love that.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. And like Pia says all the time, like, how do you do, you're so busy. Like, how do you do everything? I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't go from 0 to 100. And
exactly.
my hack is my hack is time management. And I know that the more dialed in, like if I have, things dialed in here, it helps me dial things in here. And everything builds off of itself. And then there's also, we have to have like guardrails up, right? Like we have to have safeties there in case something like goes completely haywire. Like you're not gonna test out your 1 rep max squat without pins in place or a spotter, right? So same thing with life. Like we're not just going to throw in all of these new things on top of our schedule and expect that it's going to go perfectly. We're going to add little by little, and we're going to have some guardrails in place. So for me, a guardrail is monitoring my HRV. This has been really, really powerful for me. And we do this in our app. We monitor, if people don't monitor their HRV, we have a lot of different things that we can monitor, but we can see these trends. And when things start to trend down in a negative way, I think that our mindset as lifters is to like fight, right? We want to grind stuff out, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. So we have these fail safes and these guardrails where we can see these trends going down when they should be either level or going up. And we can say, wait, stop. I don't care if you think you can keep going at this rate. Your body's saying you can't, and something's going to break. So let's back something off, whether it doesn't have to be changing anything in training. Maybe it's like, you know what, you need to try to get to bed 15 minutes earlier every night this week. Or we do emergency refeed. We'll program an emergency refeed day some days. There's a lot of different things we could do. It could be maybe taking an extra rest day or moving into a deload sooner, but we can start to, when we can measure data, we can monitor the trends, and we can see where are things starting to fail. Because I don't know about you guys, I lie to myself.
All the time.
I'm like, no, I feel great. I don't care.
I'm fine.
I know it says that my HRV is like the worst it's ever been in my life, but I feel awesome. It's fine.
That reading is wrong. I'm going to do that again. That reading is wrong. You know how many times I've done that? Yeah, but we soldier through, and it's a bit short-sighted, you know. What if you, one of my favorite things that I've taken is go slow to go fast. So sometimes, it's better just to adjust than have a complete crash and burn. And these are the things that we can do. This is why we have all these data points, is so we can, make informed decision about, am I being a wuss, or is there really something going on here, So.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing that I love about this co-coaching relationship that we have created, where we can meet, like Stacy and Pia, or Stacy and I can meet with an athlete and say, okay, these are the things that went on during this training block, and what do we need to do, all three of us together as a team, to improve the outcomes, or what do we need to continue doing that worked really, really well? And so we can look at all of that and really start to make decisions that not only help an athlete progress in their training in their gym, because it certainly will, but just equate to longevity in sport and just in life, right? Like we know, we also, it's really, really important that we are like having some sort of balance in our life and having relationships that we have the bandwidth for. And so I think that if an athlete is, killing it in the gym and they're killing it in their nutrition and everything's going really, really well, but they don't have time for anything else in their life, and that's not the life that they envision for themselves, then, oh, okay, well then how do we change that? And so I think that's cool, is that we're able to have those discussions about how to keep someone going for the long game and not burn themselves out.
And see, I love that too, because we've had like, meetings with clients and stuff where we've had all three of us present, and it's just talking about things. So maybe on my end, training looks great. Like you said, maybe on your end, the, compliance on nutrition, everything looks good, all the recovery stats. But then we get in a meeting together and talk to them, and they're happy. But like what you said, maybe they're lacking on, their social engagements, or they're not spending enough time with their family, things that aren't necessarily expressed. On my end, it looks like training's going great. On your end, It looks like nutrition's going great, but there's still this missing factor that we don't necessarily have any control over or really know until we talk about it. And so having that support system where you can actually, okay, let's analyze your life right now, right? Because it looks like you're doing great. How do you feel? And sometimes that's one thing that might not be managed by like a data point or a statistic. Yes. It's about relationships, right? And it's about taking all of it put together. Now let's talk about it. And so if we talk about it, and then it's something that we can address. It's something that we can address. Okay, well, maybe I'll pull your training back just a little bit by an extra day to give you a little more time, and that means that Kristen or Pia can make the changes in your nutrition that will be reflective for the energy and the fuel that you need. So there are just sometimes like that you might not, on my end, if training looks great, training looks perfect. On Kristen's end, Pia's end, there's things that look great, but there's a lot of things. People are complex. People are very complex, and this is just one of the things that's been so great about this co-coaching and partnership, is we really get to explore what each individual needs, what each athlete needs, and how we can tailor that specifically to them to bring you more value, to bring something to you that not only just impacts, your body, your strength, but it also affects your mind too, right? Because if you have everything aligned in your life, and I'm not just talking about like what we talk or training, I'm not just talking about your nutrition, but if you're managing your time well, if you feel like you are killing it, right? That's called momentum, right? So you're killing it in the gym, you're killing it in your nutrition. We figure out how we can manage the time so we can spend more time with our family or our significant other. We figure out that like if we read data, or if we read how we feel, if we recognize these things, if we recognize them, the patterns, the data, we can make changes. And so I think this is something that is even bigger than all of us. It's like we think that nutrition is one thing, we think that dieting is one thing, we think that getting strong is one thing, but it all plays to how you feel about yourself and how you're showing up to the world every single day. And I know that, my thing is I want to change the world, right? I want to make the world a better, stronger place. And this is how we do it. It's by making sure that you're making the decisions in your life that are going to be reflective of what is best for you and what is going to yield your best outcome. And so recognizing, through data or through just relationships and communication, I think having a support group like this, just 2 different coaches, 3 different coaches, a whole team of people that really actually support you and want to make sure that you're doing your best and whatever that looks like. It's a really cool thing to be a part of. And I'm just so happy to be in this partnership and to make sure that we are taking care of people, not just on paper, not just through macros, not just through weights, but making sure that we're helping them take control and manage their life, because that's what leads to the progressive overload in life, right? Right, Pia?
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, to see people change, and I love the idea of having like a support team, and like our entire job is to make you better, right? And you have like this whole team of people who are one, like we have if you win, we win, right? We are we are invested. And I mean, I've been on this call with Stacy, and it was just like, well, Stacy came from the training perspective, and I came from the nutrition perspective, and like we had a whole other outcome that nobody saw coming, but this person just like blossomed, and like she voiced a challenge, and we were like, oh yeah, go for it, do it, and she did, and she just changed overnight from someone into a really courageous, adventurous, this is a big challenge for her. And she just took that next step and overcame it. And she was like, oh, wow, and that had nothing really to do with what she was eating or how much she was lifting. But that's what happens when you support your people. And when you have a network around you that are just, all we are there for is to help you get better. And that's like, I've just got goosebumps. It was just really cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, that what we have to remember is that people are not numbers. People are not data. People are people. We coach real people, and we use numbers and data to help us. But at the end of the day, what really matters is like their input and how are they feeling. And I think that this model of coaching really accounts for that, where, like, just like you were saying, Stacy, like something might look perfect on paper, but if someone feels like crap, either physically or mentally, then something has to change. And sometimes we don't catch that on paper. And so that's what I love, is the like actually connecting with people. Like I think it was about a year ago, I completely changed the Fiercely Fueled coaching model to include like Zoom calls with my clients, and the amount of information that I was able to get out of them and the way that I was able to help them was just so much more powerful. And I think that it's just so cool that we can we've got to get out of our spreadsheets and get out of our data and use that as a tool. But really the way we change lives is by connecting with people and supporting them.
For me, as a training coach, right? As someone that I coach people in the gym. I used to coach softball. I've done a ton of different things as far as coaching goes. And I used to feel, definitely imposter syndrome of like, oh, I'm not a good enough coach. I don't have this certification. I don't know as much as that person. But truly and honestly, I think the number one thing about being a coach is about being able to communicate with your people, being able to communicate with your players, being able to communicate with your athletes, because it's not just, no matter what it is that you're coaching, it's not just about the outcome of the game. It's not just about the outcome of how the meet went. It's not just about these little factors. It's about how you make people feel. It's about how you make people feel. And if you make people feel seen and supported, just like what P was talking about, they can come to their own conclusions. Our job and our goal isn't just to run people like numbers and, oh, congratulations, you lost 10 pounds. What does that mean for you? Why did you want to lose 10 pounds? What does it mean to you? And what are you striving for, right? How you make people feel is going to really determine their outcome. And I think, their longevity with the entire process, because sometimes people have really negative, experiences with coaches. And then what happens? And they get shut down and they don't want to train, or they don't want to do the sport because they had a negative experience where they didn't feel seen. They didn't feel heard. They felt like just a number running through or whatever it was, right? But if we make our people feel seen, we make our people feel heard, and we support them through whatever it is, right? It's about having someone that believes in you, that whenever times get hard and, oh, well, your numbers are telling me that something's going on, talk to me. We can help them come to their own conclusions and figure out what we can do to make the changes to adjust it, instead of turning around and running or say, oh, well, this didn't work for me. It's not a, oh, this didn't work for me situation. It's, we're going to work together and figure out how we can make it work for you, because there's not a one size fits all with coaching, with training, with dieting, with anything like that. It's about building that relationship, building that connection, communicating, and figuring out how we can all get to that best version of ourselves, right? And so, I mean, it's just so much more. I love doing this, and it's so much more important than just what people see. Coaching is, oh, updating a spreadsheet, or, oh, it's just showing up to a practice. Not even close. It's everything that's in between that, right? It's about supporting your people.
Absolutely, 100%. So if you had to say like like your number one thing that clients or athletes could do to move the needle a little further, What would you say it is? Time management?
I want to say sleep. I mean, that's
Okay.
just a very specific thing.
Yeah.
Time management, absolutely. As a time management is setting a bedtime. So it's setting a bedtime to get the sleep,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But time management is huge. And that's one thing that just people talk to me, Stacey, I don't understand how you train and how you travel and how you do podcast. I don't understand. I don't either. Okay. But like what I do is I just make the time throughout my day. I schedule
Yeah.
my priorities. I list all things. Time management, you can get a lot more done than what you think you can
Yeah.
if you just get to it, right? Time management is very important, but just in hooking that to what I think is super important for athletes or just normal people. I've done a lot of reading research on just sleep just for fun because that's what we like to do with our lives, right? Is just try to figure out how we can get better and what we can optimize and things. But sleeping, most people think, oh, I'm fine with 5 or 6 hours of sleep because, society's taught us that grind mindset. And then when I tell people when I was competing, I needed 9 to 10 hours of sleep. And like that was the baseline. And now, even just on an operational standpoint, if you want me to be sharp, if you want me to be clear headed, I need at least 8 hours of sleep. Anything less than that, and I'm not my best self. Right. And so that affects every aspect and avenue of your life. If you're not getting your sleep, if you're not taking care of the basic needs first, it's going to affect your cognitive function. It's going to affect all these things. So I think the most underrated thing is sleep, period. Just for athletes or for people, because it really does affect your headspace. It affects your, just your ability to follow through with things. So I think time management, absolutely. So make sure you're setting yourself a bedtime, right? So tying that right in. How about you, Kristen?
Yeah. Well, so every time I think about like, okay, well, sleep is really, really important, or nutrition is really, really important, or like stress management is really, like, anytime I'm like, okay, this is the one thing. The pushback that I always get from someone like, okay, we need to do this, is like, how do I fit that in? I'm like, time management, like everything. That's like this theme in my life lately is everything comes back to time management. So just like you said, like you've got to manage your time so that you can get to bed on time. You've got to manage your time so that you can, plan out your meals, go grocery shopping, have food on hand, not have to go get fast food all the time, because that's not going to help anything. Or like, okay, we need to manage your stress. Well, right there, time management is going to help manage your stress. You're going to feel way less stressed out if you're managing your time properly. So I feel like everything goes back to time management. What do you think, Pia?
No, 100% agree. I mean, sleep time management, I can't sing that enough. But just one point is that time management is a skill that you can learn. And I have ADD and I am very scatty and all over the place. And I used to say, well, I have ADD. I can't do these planning things. But you can learn. There are ways, and again, it's progressive overload. It's a skill that you can hone and refine over time. So it may seem really daunting we're not necessarily saying plan everything out for every minute of your day, but have a sense of what your structure looks like and what's important to you. So if your priority is X, then that's what you're going to make time for, and the rest of the stuff can happen afterwards. But again, it's a skill that's coachable and something you can learn and something you can constantly refine. And that's how Stacy can operate at the level that she does, because it's now just become such an intuitive thing. It's such a habit. You do it without thinking. And I mean, and you too, Kristen. Yeah.
Well, so Pia and I are putting together this wellness challenge for an organization right now. And one of the things I was like, okay, well, so sleep, there's like 5 core principles that I have them working on, like time management, stress management, nutrition, exercise, and sleep. And I was like, okay, so the recommendation is, 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And Pia's like, okay, hold up. Like, just hear me out. So yes, that is the recommendation, but you understand that some of the people coming into this challenge probably only sleep 5 hours a night. And if you're telling them to sleep 7, they immediately are going to feel like they're failing. I was like, very good point. So you start where you are and you just add a little, just improve a little. So if you're sleeping 5 hours a night, maybe tonight go to bed 15 minutes earlier, And so I think like, yes, we want to have all these things in line, but like to Pia's point, you don't have to have your entire every minute of your day scheduled out, and you should have downtime in your day. And you don't have to like go hardcore on changes. Just enhance what you're doing a little bit each day.
Yeah. And then
Mm-hmm.
progressive overload. Sorry, I keep saying the same thing, but it's exactly that. It's like, it's such an amazing concept. And I think as people, and we were speaking about this as well, is that, people they will change all their sleep. They will start like a 5-day-a-week exercise program. They will cut out food groups. You're not making things easier for yourself. And it's a lot. I mean, if somebody says, well, what is the biggest thing I can do right now? And I say to them, well, drink your water and get an extra half an hour of sleep. They'll kind of like look at me weird, because it costs you nothing. Please just try it. And then they do. And then, but it's sometimes, the discipline is in these. I mean, it's for me, arriving at train's the easy part in a way. I arrive, I have a program. I don't have to think about you. You kind of just do it. But what you do with the rest of your day is where the real discipline comes in, or the real, I guess it is a form of discipline. And, going to bed and making sure that I get my enough sleep. It's not always that easy. It's very easy to, sit there on your phone, looking at social media, watching TV, but it's also a choice that I make to say, I want to prioritize my recovery. I want to prioritize my lifting. I want to feel great tomorrow. So I'm going to choose to not spend an hour watching this TV show and go to bed, And people also don't realize how much choice they have in how their day rolls out. Yes, you can't always control what happens at work or what your boss needs you to do or crises or anything like that. But you have a lot more control than you actually acknowledge about your day, So again, the time management is more, I think it's also just bringing awareness to how much you do have in your control, which is more than you think,
Way more than what people think. Absolutely. Well, good deal. This was really fun. I'm glad that we did this. Thank you for coming on, Stacy. This was so fun.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Just as a side note, you two individually are like two of my favorite people to talk to, because I think you just always have such insightful ways of looking at the world. And so all of this coming together is just really fun for me. So thank you both for being here. To get signed up for this one-of-a-kind coaching that promises to reveal the very best version of yourself by working with both Stacy and the Fiercely Fueled team, head to guide.fiercelyfueled.com/products/BBS. Also linked in the show notes. We cannot wait to work with you.